Things are escalating at an incredible pace. We are reacting to a critical update from Professor Marandi, recorded just hours after the U.S. and Israel launched major combat operations in Iran, with Iran already striking bases in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. We are entering a very dangerous phase. I'll give you my personal take at the end. Let's dive in.
The Israeli media reports, as well as American media, that within the last hour, that they began attacking Iran in what they called a, quote, preemptive strike. And we now see explosions heard in Tehran. And if I'm not mistaken, they're also now happening in other cities. I was wondering, if you can tell us what's happening there on the ground.
Well, as we all believed, the United States and the Israeli regime are completely dishonest and deceptive. And we've already seen that an infinite amount of times before. And we saw it during the 12-day war as we were negotiating between rounds 5 and 6 of talks. The Israeli regime and the Trump regime carried out a blitzkrieg attack against the Iranian people. And during this period, people have been expecting that such an attack would take place. The Iranians, of course, negotiated, as you and I have discussed before, both to see if a solution was possible, but also so that the international community and its own people would all feel and understand very clearly that it is not the Iranian side that's seeking death and destruction and murder. And the talks, by all accounts, were making progress. The Omani foreign minister did an interview in the United States and spoke of optimism and progress. Yet the Epstein class was unhappy, and they are not seeking peace between Iran and the United States or peace in our region. As the U.S. ambassador, I can't say admitted, he basically openly said, and no one has condemned him or punished him in the U.S. government, that if the Israeli regime takes the entire region, that's fine with the United States. So when we have this mentality among Americans, among American officials, and when they constantly attack while they are negotiating, then the Iranians have no option but to strike back and strike back very, very hard. Now, I do not know, as at this moment that we speak, what role the United States is playing in this attack, if its own missiles are being used or if its own jets are being used. But without a doubt, the Iranian response against the Israeli regime will be very harsh. And people have been murdered today in Tehran and in other cities. This is an unprovoked war. But the Iranians, as we saw, when they were far less prepared 8 months ago, they struck back, and ultimately it was the Netanyahu regime that sought a ceasefire. So I have no doubt that Iran will strike back and strike back hard with success today. The question is, what is the United States going to do? Has it played a role? I don't know yet. Will it play a role? Because you and I both know that the Americans apparently have been seen, since they have no excuse to carry out this unprovoked war, they are trying to find a scenario or where the Israelis would attack, and so that would give them an excuse to attack. Now, what excuse does that give them? I have no idea, because that would be aggression, and joining in on aggression does not enhance the logic of war or enhance the logic of a just war. They enhance the or create a justification for war. It is pure and ugly aggression, and it comes at a time, Glenn, when we see that in the United States, for the first time, the Israeli regime has less sympathy among Americans than the Palestinians. And I think this is significant. The regime sees that time is not on its side. It sees that the world has turned against it. And even the American people, who are the most propagandized people in the world, they are seeing through the propaganda. They're seeing through the censorship of social media and the one-sided propaganda of mainstream media. And that is not good news for the regime at all. So I think they are behaving in a very desperate manner.
Well, in regards to the U.S. not having a good reason, Politico had recently an article come out where they made this point that there was, well, many people in Washington, according to Politico, believed it was better for Israel to attack Iran first, because then when Iran retaliates, the U.S. then has the reason to join in on the war under the guise of defending Israel, thus not being an aggressor. But this kind of begs the question, though, how do you, I know, and you're not part of the Iranian government, but how do you expect Iran to retaliate here? Will it then strike Israel and then wait to be attacked again by the United States? Or do you think the Iranian government will not consider Israel and the United States to be two separate actors in this war?
I don't know, because it depends on what happened. So there's no doubt that Iran will strike the Israeli regime. That will happen shortly. It may be happening as we speak right now. I don't know. But with regards to the United States, I think we'll have to see what role the United States played. Now, maybe the United States is saying this was a joint operation to provoke Iran. We don't know.
Yep.
Maybe it was just the Israelis, and Americans are saying we are in it. We are in on it too. Or the Israelis are saying we were a part of it too. So that would make the Iranians strike the Americans, and then the Americans would say the Iranians attacked us. We don't know what games they're playing yet. Maybe right now the commanders and the leaders of the country have figured it out. But speaking to you now, I don't know. So what is for certain is that Iran will punish the Israeli regime. What is unclear is what role the United States has so far played. Maybe they have played a role. Maybe they're pretending that they played a role to provoke Iran. It's unclear. But what is clear is that the United States, the Epstein regime, the Zionists that control so much of the United States, they want to join in on this. So we have to be very careful about what they mean when this was a joint operation. It may have actually been an Israeli regime operation, but the Americans want to deceive Iran into striking American targets. Nothing is clear for the moment, but I think during the next few hours, things will become much clearer.
What do we know so far, though, in terms of what the Israelis have hit? Because it began with some news stories coming out that they hit Tehran, but then, from what I understand, other Iranian cities have been hit as well. So, do we know about the targets? Are this military, infrastructure, political?
It's unclear yet to me, again, because I'm sitting here with you and I'm not following up on the news that much. What I've seen on the internet is that they've struck the Ministry of Intelligence, the guards, possibly the leader's office, maybe the president's office. That's not clear to me. So, but the Iranians have been taking precautions. And while they cannot completely shut down government and business as usual has to go on, but it is not like it was 8 months ago. So the Iranians are far less vulnerable, comparatively speaking. But at the end of the day, this is a blitzkrieg attack. When you have a blitzkrieg attack, you're going to have casualties, you're going to have innocent people murdered, you're going to have government officials murdered. But I don't think this is going to play out well for the Israeli regime at all. It's going to be worse than the 12-day war for them. The big question, of course, is what is the United States going to do? Iran is prepared for war with the United States. And we've discussed this earlier. But if there is war with the United States, it's going to bring down the global economy. And the Iranians are going to fight for their survival. And so people across the world have to recognize that whatever happens, it is the fault of the Trump regime, the Epstein class, the Netanyahu regime. And I think this is going to mobilize the world against the United States and the Israeli regime further. The United States is a rogue regime. It's strangling the people of Cuba as we speak, and U.S. media is quiet about it because they're all captured. They're owned by the Epstein class. We see that the people of Venezuela are being forced to carry out policies dictated by Washington. We see that the United States ambassador is basically saying Israel can take whatever it wants in the region, and he's not rebuked. He's not removed. He's not, what he says is not rejected by Washington. Why? Because that is unofficial policy. It's not official policy, but it's unofficial policy.
Well, is it possible? I've seen the argument as well that Israel would attack to then provoke Iranian attack on American forces, and then that would pull in the United States. This is, of course, premised on the idea that the Americans aren't aware of what the Israelis are doing, but it does put Iran in a dilemma, though, because on one hand, it will be easier just to fight initially the Israelis, but it seems very unlikely that Americans will sit this one out. So then it also loses the benefit of, I guess, not waiting to be hit first. Do you know if there's been any, what are the policies or expectations for what Iran could do?
I don't think there's any dilemma at all. The Israeli regime has attacked, we will punish it. If the United States attacks, we will punish it too. The question that I have, and this is just a personal question, maybe this is not a question for those who are in charge right now, they know exactly what's going on. When the Israeli regime and people in media are quoting American officials that this was a joint attack, maybe what they're trying to do is to provoke Iran to carry out an attack on the United States, thinking that this is a joint attack. That's just my personal guess. But I think Iran's policy is quite clear. Iran will strike the Israeli regime very hard. If the United States attacks, it's going to be an all-out war.
In terms of the scope of this, do you think, given that the missiles are, well, I wouldn't say they're coming in slow, but do you think this is something that the Israelis might try and Americans might try to sell as a limited attack? If you and I discussed this before, that they would prefer a limited attack, just to hit Iran a little bit and then tell the Iranians, okay, we're done now, if you don't retaliate. Do you think that's what they might be going for here, given that the U.S. Israelis didn't, come in with everything they have right away in a massive attack? Or if so, how do you expect Iran to respond? Do you think there's any appetite to accept this limited attack?
If it's just an Israeli attack, Iran will punish it thoroughly and pound it until it is beaten so badly that it begs for a ceasefire. That's scenario A. Scenario B, if the United States attacks Iran, then the Iranians said this is going to be a regional war. It's going to be an all-out war. So my assumption is that the Iranians are not going to play that sort of game, and they will strike back very hard. And the Iranians have amassed a very powerful capability to do so. Remember, Glenn, this is a war for Iran's survival. If the United States attacks, it will be a war for Iran's survival. If for the United States, it will be a war of choice to help the genocidal monsters in Tel Aviv, to help ethno-supremacism, to help Israeli expansionism. That's what it's for the Americans. despite the fact that its own people don't want the war, and despite the fact that its own people are increasingly coming to despise the Israeli regime. But for Iran, this will be a war of survival. So it will hit back hard. But again, we're talking about scenarios. And maybe as you and I are speaking, this is being played out. I don't know. But so far, as we speak, the strike has come from Israel. They claim it's a joint strike, but it seems to be coming from Israel. So Iran will respond to Israel. If it is indeed a joint attack, then Iran will respond to the United States and we will have a regional war. But it could be that this is an Israeli attack. The Americans want to label it as American in order to provoke Iran.
Yeah, I've seen in the Israeli media, Jerusalem Post, they refer to this as a U.S.-Israeli strike. But again, as you said, it's unclear in the early stages if this is just to get the Iranians to launch an attack on America, so it becomes seen as the aggressor. But
And by the way, Glenn, after the show, remind me to give you a couple of phone numbers just in case something happens in the days ahead, so you'll have people to contact anybody.
I will do. And many countries announced only yesterday that they have to evacuate immediately from Iran, Israel. Some also extended this to other parts of the region. I guess this is obviously also predicting the retaliation which would come. So if it turns out now that the United States, as Israeli media reports, joined in on this attack on Iran, what do you see happening not in the days coming, but today, essentially?
If the United States attacks, I think that we'll have regional war. If I was in the Persian Gulf region, I would leave immediately if it's still possible. I don't think that it's smart for anyone to stay or even in Iraq, for Westerners to stay in Iraq. I think they should all leave. But if the U.S. attacks, I think Iran will shut down oil and gas from the Persian Gulf. Iran will strike at American targets and anything that has to do with U.S. interests. In other words, that's a very vague position for Iran to take. It could mean anything. I assume it will depend on U.S. targeting as well. How the United States, assuming the United States attacks Iran, the types of targets that Iran chooses will depend on U.S. targeting. I don't know these things, but what I do know is that if we have all-out war, if the United States attacks Iran, it's all-out war. It will be a regional war, and the Strait of Hormuz will be shut down. And if the United States, Iran will do whatever it needs to survive this war. And all those countries in the Persian Gulf region that host U.S. bases, they're all complicit. Or in the Caucasus, they're all complicit in this war. They were part of this war. They can't have their cake and eat it too. The Jordanian regime, it's quite stunning that all these countries in the region, even as the U.S. ambassador says that it's fine with the United States for the Israeli regime to take Jordan, Syria, and parts of Saudi Arabia and Egypt, that these regimes continue to be so complicit with the United States. And of course, Turkey continuing to transport oil from Baku to Netanyahu.
Well, I guess the dilemma for the United States in engaging in such an attack on a large country as Iran is it needs a lot of military resources. I think they have like 100 aerial refuelers simply because their fighters and bombers can't reach Iran without them. But with all this military hardware in the region, it also presents Iran with a lot of different targets. So it becomes very difficult for the U.S., especially due to reports of them having limited air defenses, because they're also fighting in Ukraine and where they're fighting everywhere now. So how do you see the priorities for Iran? Do you have they set out any targets they want to go for first? I mean, the Gulf states, obviously, there's been a lot of tension, Bahrain or United Arab Emirates. I mean, again, the Iranian military command is probably not whispering into your ear, but as an Iranian there in Tehran, knee deep in these issues, how do you see the likely, or do you think Iran will just launch at everything at once?
Well, again, I'm just guessing. If this is the Israelis alone, then Iran will focus on battering the regime. And but if the United States gets involved, then Iran will do whatever it takes to make sure that the Americans regret attacking Iran. So I would imagine that striking empty bases would not be a priority. They would strike places where it would hurt the most, the maximum suffering. And since all these regimes have been completely complicit, from Qatar to the Emirates, even though these two countries hate each other, they're both American proxies. Qatar was never a supporter of the Palestinian people. Neither was Erdogan or anyone else. We see how they're all in the U.S. camp. So Qatar, just like the Emirates, is a possible target, depending on what happens. I don't want to say anything right now because I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the involvement of the United States is and how things will play out. But if there's all-out war, all I can say it will be a regional war. Iran's allies across the region, which are powerful and many, they will engage. The Iranian missile and drone capabilities are second to none in this region by far. They will engage, and there are so many soft targets that the United States cannot defend that can easily be destroyed. You have oil and gas installations everywhere. You have tankers and ships everywhere. And each one of these that are destroyed, shutting the Strait of Hormuz, that's one thing. But if the assets in the Persian Gulf region are destroyed, the oil and gas and the tankers, then even if the Strait of Hormuz is open, it could take years, depending on how long the war goes and how widespread the damage is, depending again on how long the war lasts. It could take years for the oil to go to be exported like it was before, and that would create very, very long-term damage and misery for people across the globe. This is from the Persian Gulf region, from West Asia and the Caucasus combined. It's like, if I'm not mistaken, almost 25% of the world's oil comes from this area. Imagine what that will do to the markets. Imagine what that will do to industries. Imagine what that will do to companies, corporations, people at home, ordinary people. It will have a devastating effect from the southern tip of the Americas to the southern tip of Africa to everywhere to New Zealand. Everyone will be affected, and this will be the doing of the United States. But until it becomes clear for me what role the United States is truly playing, I really can't say much more because, again, the claim that this is a joint operation sounds very satanic to me. It sounds to me, and I may be wrong, that the Israeli regime is carrying out this attack, and they're saying it's a joint operation so that the Iranians will attack or hit something that's American, and then the Americans can say that, oh, they struck our target, so we're part of this war now. That's basically what I think is happening. But we have to keep this in mind, Glenn, that again, the Omani foreign minister went to the United States and was upbeat about the negotiations and explained to people across the world what was happening and how progress had been made. And yet, despite that, just like during the 12-Day War, the United States and supported gave the green light that part is obvious. But the Israeli regime carried out this blitzkrieg attack.
I think it's a very reasonable hypothesis because obviously the United States have assisted. It's unthinkable otherwise, but this could be a much more powerful strike if the U.S. would be more directly involved with all its assets in the region. So the only reason one can think of why they would only assist but not be very directly involved is for the optics here. As I mentioned before, political mention. It's better to have Israel attack first, and then the U.S. simply helping, Israel's right to exist, or this kind of narratives. But just my last
But it
question.
doesn't really, I mean, if anyone is sane and anyone is reasonable and logical, it doesn't help the case. It doesn't to say that, okay, if the Israeli regime, we don't have justification for war. So if the Israeli regime attacks and then we attack, that will give us a justification. It doesn't. It actually does the opposite, because in a sane world, the aggressor would be condemned and marginalized. But they want to join in, saying that this is their justification. It's the exact opposite. But that's how logic works for the Epstein class. And that is why the United States has become a threat to the world. It's not just Iran. It's not just Cuba. It's everyone. This is all the rules have been cast aside. The United States expects Russia, China, Iran, BRICS, everyone across the world to abide by the rules, yet they are openly and explicitly now above the law. And that is why governments and ordinary people from top to bottom, they have a role to play. People have to protest. People have to boycott everything American in the supermarkets, anything. And governments have to seek solutions that marginalize the United States. Iran will play its part. If the United States attacks, Iran will hit back hard. It will be bloody. It will be brutal. It will be painful. People like me may not survive, but this is the only thing that you can do. The United States must be forced to back down. Otherwise, if the United States succeeds, there will be nothing stopping this madness.
Well, as a last question, what do you see as being external support? Because Iran doesn't stand alone either. It has, on one level, it has regional allies in Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine. In a more global scope, it also has at least indirect support, I guess, from the great powers, be it China, Russia, in terms of intelligence, possibly targeting weapons, air defenses, these kind of things. What do you expect to see based on how this war is starting?
Could you say that? Could you ask the question one more time?
Oh, well, what do you expect to see from international support on
Okay.
on
Yeah,
Iran's side, both from the regional allies in from Yemen to Palestine, Lebanon, but also from the great powers, that is China and Russia?
Well, again, if it's the Israeli regime, I think that for Iran, beating them back and punishing them and bringing them to their knees can be done without any intervention from any other side. Again, this is my personal understanding. But if the United States gets involved, then all of Iran's allies will be at war. It will be a regional war. It won't be like an RPG attack somewhere and no, it will be all-out war. From Yemen, which has been preparing itself, Iraq, it's Iran's allies have been preparing themselves, and so on. So this will be something very big and something that the U.S. cannot manage because there are just too many people involved. Iraq is a huge country. Yemen is a huge country. The United States already lost a 7-week war to Yemen, and Yemen now has been preparing itself for the next stage. In the United States, its resources are divided, in different places right now. I mean, there's Iran, there's resistance in Iraq, there's Yemen, and there are others in the axis of resistance. So this will not be something that the U.S. can manage. And I think that the international community will, I don't know how it will play out, but I think it's only going to make countries across the global majority tilt away from the United States, move away from the United States, because the United States is becoming increasingly dangerous. It's becoming, it's a truly rogue regime. And I think the hatred for the Israeli regime is going to just increase. I think today was another turning point where people across the world are seeing this rogue regime once again trying to slaughter people, trying to destroy attempts to bring about peace and stability, because that is the nature of the regime. And people are seeing it. This is not the first time. They had a ceasefire in Lebanon. Every day they're murdering Lebanese citizens. They have a ceasefire in Gaza. Every day they're murdering multiple people in Gaza. They're expanding their presence in the West Bank and murdering people, stealing their homes and lands. And they attack Iran as the US and Iran were talking, and they do it once again as the US and Iran are talking, and as the Omani mediators was saying that things are moving forward well. This is not going to end well for the Israeli regime.
I guess just sorry, just a last very short question was this. Like often you see countries want to operate in the gray zone. That is, they don't want to be either attacking or not attacking. So, for example, what does U.S. involvement mean, as well as the Gulf states? Because once Iran begins to retaliate now against Israel, it seems very predictable that the U.S. will help to intercept whatever Iran launches back. And when in the way they will help, it means they will also use the airspace of Gulf states to intercept this. In other words, then they're participating indirectly, directly, however one wants to define this. But how do you expect Iran to see this kind of involvement? Because that's kind of operating in that gray space where they, I guess, allows for portraying Iran, whatever it does, as either being aggressive or weak.
You're right. That is a gray zone. Turkey's airspace is being used with AWACS. The U.S. bases in Turkey are being used against Iran. The same is true in the Persian Gulf, in Jordan. They're all being mobilized against Iran. All of these countries are complicit. But we'll have to see what the Iranians decide. Last time round, the Iranians focused on the Israeli regime. And despite U.S. attempts, Iran was able to devastate the regime to force it to a ceasefire. I can't comment on this right now because I really don't know. But obviously, any sort of cooperation by countries in the Persian Gulf region in particular, or in the Caucasus, is going to have, it's going to be treated differently this time round than last time. But it's too early for me to say. And since I'm not a government official, I don't want to say something that may be inaccurate.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I know, things are quite chaotic and stressful there in Tehran this morning. So, stay safe and let's hope this does not get out of control.
Hopefully, the Israeli regime will be defeated, but more importantly, people across the world have to start acting instead of passively. They have to be